My brothers and sisters in Islam, when we perform wudu, the simple act of washing our limbs, we often think of it merely as a ritual cleansing, a physical preparation for prayer, a means to present ourselves to Allah in a state of purity. But wudu is not only physical, it is deeply spiritual, a reflection of our inner state, a mirror of our hearts, and a preparation for standing in front of the Almighty. One major sin that many of us may not realize we commit during wudu is wasting water, or extravagance, known in Arabic as israf. This is not merely a matter of being careful with resources, it is a spiritual responsibility, a moral imperative, and an act that reflects our consciousness of Allah in every action, no matter how small it may seem. We must first understand that wudu is an act of worship, a sacred ritual that connects our bodies and souls. The water we use is not for our mere convenience, not to be treated carelessly, not to be squandered as if it is limitless. Every drop of water is a trust ayamana from Allah. To waste it during wudu is to violate this trust. The Prophet himself taught us moderation in all things, even in water. It is reported in hadith that he would perform wudu using only a small quantity of water, even if performing ablution from a flowing river. This teaches us that efficiency and mindfulness in worship are not optional, but required. It is a reminder that Allah is watching not only our intentions, but our actions. The very manner in which we perform every act of worship. Think deeply about what it means to waste water during wudu. Perhaps it is leaving the tap running excessively, letting water flow over the hands without thought, or washing more than necessary. Each of these actions may seem trivial, insignificant even in the eyes of the world, but in the sight of Allah, every misuse of a blessing is significant. Our wudu is meant to prepare us for prayer, for the direct conversation with our Lord. And if it is accompanied by wastefulness, by heedlessness, by indulgence, it loses a part of its spiritual beauty. It becomes a mechanical act rather than a conscious, mindful act of devotion. Consider the world around us. Millions of people suffer from lack of clean water, yet we treat it as infinite, as if it is merely a tool for our convenience. How can we present ourselves before Allah in the state of prayer, claiming purity, while ignoring such a clear moral responsibility? It is not only a matter of ritual compliance, it is a matter of justice, gratitude, and integrity. Wasting water is an act of ingratitude. It disregards the blessings of Allah. It disregards the immense care that has gone into making clean water accessible to us, the systems, the labor, the natural order that provides life-sustaining water. When we waste it, and we are committing a minor sin, a disregard, that can grow into larger spiritual neglect if unchecked. Furthermore, wudu is meant to purify not only the body, but the soul. It is meant to instill mindfulness, a recognition that every action we perform has significance. The act of washing the face, hands, arms, wiping the head, and washing the feet is itself symbolic. It represents the cleansing of sins, the preparation for standing in the sacred presence of Allah. If we perform these actions mindlessly, wastefully, without reflection, then we undermine the purpose of wudu. We rob ourselves of spiritual benefit, and worse, we commit a sin that is avoidable, a sin of excess and heedlessness. It is also important to understand the spiritual principle behind moderation in all acts of worship. Islam teaches balance. We are to neither neglect our duties nor engage in extravagance. Every action, whether physical or spiritual, should be guided by moderation, mindfulness, and intentionality. Water is a gift. Using it wisely is obedience. Using it carelessly is disobedience. Every drop saved in wudu is a reflection of consciousness of Allah, a demonstration of gratitude, a practice of self-discipline, and a subtle yet profound act of worship. Consider how the Prophet demonstrated this principle. His wudu was deliberate, precise, and measured. Even when there was abundant water, he did not waste it. He exemplified that worship is not only in the visible act, but in the care, intention, and mindfulness behind it. His actions were teachings to us to be conscious in all things, to avoid extravagance, and to uphold the principle of stewardship over the blessings Allah has provided. The lesson extends beyond wudu. Every blessing we have, every resource, every gift is a trust from Allah. To waste it is to betray that trust. To use it mindfully in moderation is to show gratitude and obedience. Wudu is therefore not just a preparatory act for prayer. It is a reflection of our character, our consciousness, and our moral responsibility. When we approach it with care, mindfulness and precision, we demonstrate our awareness of Allah, our acknowledgement of the blessings around us, and our willingness to follow the prophetic example in every detail of our lives. We must also recognize that avoiding this sin is not merely an external act, it is internal. It is about cultivating a mindset of mindfulness, moderation, and intentionality. When we approach wudu with the thought, I am using what Allah has provided me responsibly. I am mindful of every drop. I am preparing my soul for prayer. We transform a simple ritual into a profound act of devotion. The water becomes a means of purification, not only of the body, but of the soul, an instrument through which we train ourselves in discipline, gratitude, and spiritual consciousness. There is also a communal dimension to consider. By conserving water, even during personal acts of worship, we set an example for others. We cultivate a culture of responsibility. We recognize that blessings are not solely for our use, but are part of a broader social and ethical responsibility. This mindfulness extends the spiritual benefits of wudu into the social sphere, reminding us that our actions, even the smallest ones, have implications for the world around us. Reflect also on the symbolism embedded in the act of wudu. Washing the hands, face, and feet with care and precision is an allegory for a living life with awareness and discipline. Wasting water disrupts this symbolism. It is an outward act of negligence that mirrors an inward laxity, a carelessness that may extend beyond wudu into our daily lives. Our moral choices and our obedience to Allah. Avoiding extravagance in wudu reinforces self-control, mindfulness, and spiritual attentiveness, qualities essential for the higher purpose of prayer and devotion. Thus, the avoidance of this major sin is not merely a technical requirement, it is a profound spiritual principle. It is about living consciously, about respecting the blessings of Allah, about aligning our external actions with our internal awareness, and about demonstrating gratitude in the simplest of acts. It is about understanding that even the smallest actions have consequences, and that obedience to Allah is not only about performing rituals correctly, but performing them with care, attention, and reflection. Every time we perform wudu, we have an opportunity to practice moderation, to demonstrate gratitude, to align our actions with the prophetic example, to purify not only our bodies, but our intentions, and to cultivate a mindset of spiritual attentiveness that permeates every part of our lives. To waste water during wudu is to miss this opportunity, to neglect a teaching that is simple yet profound, to fall into a minor sin that could become habitual if left unchecked. In conclusion, though this sin may seem minor in worldly terms, its significance in the spiritual realm is immense. Every drop wasted in wudu is a missed opportunity to honor the gift of water, to embody the principles of moderation, to follow the prophetic example, and to cultivate mindfulness and gratitude. Avoiding this sin is an act of obedience, a reflection of inner consciousness, and a vital step toward achieving the full spiritual benefits of wudu. When we think of wudu, many of us picture the routine, the sequence of washing the face, arms, wiping the head, washing the feet. It becomes almost automatic, mechanical, something performed before prayer, often without thought. Yet wudu is far more than a series of physical motions. It is an act of worship, an opportunity for purification, both external and internal. And the most essential aspect of wudu, the very foundation upon which all its blessings rest, is completeness. To perform wudu incompletely, to skip even a small obligatory part, is to diminish its value, to risk performing prayer in a state that falls short of the standards Allah has prescribed. The obligation of washing all the required parts is not a suggestion, it is a commandment. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, has set specific boundaries, specific requirements for acts of worship. Every detail in wudu carries significance. The face, the arms, the head, the feet, each has its prescribed method and sequence. These are not arbitrary. They are deliberate, they are meaningful, they are part of a divine system designed to cleanse, prepare, and elevate the believer. When one part is neglected, the act is no longer fully wudu. It is incomplete, a ritual performed in deficiency, lacking the spiritual fullness that Allah intends. Consider the face, which is the first obligatory part in wudu. The Prophet emphasized washing the entire face thoroughly, from the hairline to the chin, from ear to ear. The face is the window to the soul, the instrument of expression, the reflection of our inner state. To neglect any part of it, to perform a half-hearted washing, is to overlook an essential step in spiritual preparation. The face is what we present to the world, what we raise in prayer before Allah, what symbolizes our consciousness and attentiveness. Incomplete washing of the face reflects carelessness, a lack of mindfulness, and a disconnect from the spiritual intention behind wudu. Next, we turn to the arms, washing up to the elbows. The arms are the instruments of action, the means through which we perform both good and bad deeds. The Prophet instructed us to wash the arms completely, ensuring that water reaches every part. Skipping even a portion is not trivial. It undermines the symbolic cleansing of our deeds. Just as our actions are meant to be purified through intention and accountability, so too must the limbs be washed in full, symbolizing the purification of our actions before standing in prayer. To neglect washing the arms completely is to risk entering prayer with incomplete preparation, both physically and spiritually. Then comes the act of wiping the head. The head is the seat of thought, contemplation, and decision-making. Wiping the head in wudu is not merely a physical act. It is symbolic of cleansing our thoughts, focusing our minds on Allah, and acknowledging His sovereignty over our intellect and reasoning. To perform this act incompletely or to skip it entirely is to diminish the spiritual significance of wudu. The Prophet demonstrated each step meticulously, teaching us that the act of worship must be performed fully, deliberately, and with conscious awareness. Every missed motion, every skipped detail is a deviation from the prophetic example and a compromise of spiritual integrity. The feet, finally, are washed up to the ankles. They are our means of movement, our connection to the world, the instruments that carry us through life's path. Washing the feet is an act of humility, of recognition that even the parts of our body most distant from our face, most distant from our consciousness, are included in the purification process. To neglect the feet is to neglect a part of ourselves, a part that participates in every journey, every action, every decision. Complete washing is a reflection of completeness in intention, mindfulness, and obedience. Incomplete washing leaves a gap, a deficiency that diminishes the spiritual impact of wudu. We must also remember that wudu is not just about moving water over the skin. It is about attention, care, and intention. The act becomes meaningful only when performed fully, with awareness. To rush, to skim over parts, to be distracted is to compromise completeness. Completeness is not measured in speed or convenience, but in the thorough, deliberate fulfillment of every obligation. Each limb, each motion, each drop of water has its purpose. Incomplete wudu is not only a physical deficiency, but a spiritual one. It represents negligence in worship, a failure to honor the guidance of the Prophet and a missed opportunity for purification. Completeness also protects the validity of our prayers. Salah is accepted in the state of proper wudu, and proper wudu is defined by thorough washing of all obligatory parts. Neglecting even one part renders wudu invalid, jeopardizing the acceptance of prayer. This is not a matter of legalism, it is a matter of spiritual integrity. Allah commands what is just and precise, and our obedience must reflect His guidance without compromise. To ignore completeness is to compromise the essence of worship, to risk performing Salah in a state that falls short of divine expectation. Moreover, completeness in wudu cultivates discipline and mindfulness in life. The lessons extend beyond ritual purification. When we train ourselves to be thorough in wudu, to attend to every detail, we train ourselves to be meticulous in character, in ethics, and in daily conduct. Every aspect of life benefits from this practice. Completeness is not just a ritual requirement, it is a moral principle, a spiritual discipline, and a reflection of a conscious, intentional life. We must also consider the prophetic methodology. The Prophet demonstrated each act with precision, ensuring completeness. His example teaches us that attention to detail is not a trivial matter. It is a reflection of sincerity, devotion, and consciousness of Allah. Every omission is a deviation from the Sunnah and a lost opportunity to embody the spiritual lessons of wudu fully. By performing every obligatory act in full, we align ourselves with the prophetic path, ensuring that our worship is both correct and spiritually enriching. Another aspect of completeness is repetition and verification. While wudu is not meant to be excessive, there is wisdom in ensuring that every part is properly washed. The Prophet would perform each step deliberately, sometimes repeating motions to ensure nothing was missed. This is not a matter of doubt, but of mindfulness and diligence. Completeness demands attention, verification, and care. It is a reflection of a believer's commitment to worship in its proper form, acknowledging that every detail matters in the sight of Allah. Completeness also has a spiritual dimension in terms of intention. Each action in wudu, when performed fully, reinforces the intention of purification. And the mind and body work together. Every washed limb is an act of obedience, every wiped area a reflection of submission, every drop of water a symbol of spiritual cleansing. Incomplete wudu leaves a gap in this spiritual architecture. It is like building a house and leaving out a wall or a roof. The structure is weakened and the intended effect is compromised. Only completeness ensures that wudu fulfills its purpose, preparing the believer to stand in prayer, cleansed and focused, ready for direct communion with Allah. Finally, completeness is a matter of honor to the ritual itself. Wudu is a gift, a practice, a divine ordinance meant to elevate our spiritual state. To perform it incompletely is to dishonor the ritual, to treat it carelessly, and to miss the profound wisdom embedded in each motion. By committing to completeness, we honor Allah's command, follow the prophetic example, and cultivate a level of spiritual consciousness that permeates all aspects of our worship. It is not merely an obligation, it is an opportunity for spiritual growth, for mindfulness, for cultivating a life aligned with divine guidance. Wudu is a sacred act, a preparation for standing before Allah in prayer. Yet it is often performed in a state of distraction with the mind elsewhere, or worse, accompanied by unnecessary speech. This, my dear brothers and sisters, is a grave error that diminishes the spiritual value of wudu and disconnects us from its true purpose. Every time we engage in casual talk, laughter, or trivial chatter during wudu, we risk turning a profound act of worship into a mere routine, a mechanical motion devoid of spiritual meaning. Allah commands mindfulness in all acts of worship, and wudu is no exception. It is an act of purification, not merely of the body, but of the soul, and every distraction or idle word detracts from this sacred purpose. Consider the very essence of wudu. When the Prophet performed ablution, he did so with full concentration, focusing on the act and the intention behind it. He did not speak unnecessarily, he did not allow his mind to wander, and he did not treat wudu as a mundane chore. Every action was deliberate, precise, and infused with consciousness of Allah. This mindfulness is a key principle that transforms wudu from a simple ritual into an act of worship that carries immense spiritual weight. Talking unnecessarily during wudu reflects heedlessness and a lack of reverence for the sacredness of the act. It is not only a minor lapse, it is a deviation from the prophetic example and an obstacle to achieving the full spiritual benefit of purification. We must understand that speech during wudu is not inherently forbidden, but it must be purposeful. Conversations that distract from the ritual, that break concentration, or that draw our attention away from the act of worship are harmful. They interrupt the flow of mindfulness, preventing us from internalizing the symbolic cleansing that wudu represents. The Prophet's example shows that even in the midst of daily life, when performing acts of worship, one must be fully present, fully aware, and fully engaged. Every limb washed, every motion performed should be accompanied by a heart aware of Allah's presence. And this awareness is shattered by unnecessary speech and distraction. Imagine performing wudu while discussing trivial matters with others. Your hands wash, your face is cleansed, your feet are submerged, but your mind is elsewhere. You speak, laugh, and plan mundane affairs while in the process of purification. What then is the value of this wudu? Is it truly an act that prepares you to stand before Allah in prayer? Or has it become a perfunctory routine, a series of motions without spiritual depth? This, my dear brothers and sisters, is exactly what Allah warns us against. Wudu is a sacred opportunity to align body, mind, and soul. Every unnecessary word, every trivial thought, every distraction is a deviation from this divine opportunity. Avoiding unnecessary speech during wudu also protects the purity of our intention. The Prophet taught that every act of worship must be accompanied by sincerity, ikhlas, and mindfulness. To speak aimlessly or to become distracted is to compromise the integrity of intention. Our focus shifts from Allah to worldly matters, and our wudu loses its potency. The purity of water and the cleansing of the limbs must be matched by the purity of intention and concentration. Otherwise, the act is incomplete and the spiritual benefit is diminished. Distraction during wudu can take many forms beyond speech. It may be mental wandering, thinking of worldly concerns, planning the day ahead, or engaging in idle fantasies. Each distraction breaks the continuity of mindfulness and reduces the spiritual impact of the act. Wudu is meant to be a moment of reflection, a pause from worldly concerns, a preparation for direct communion with the Creator. To allow distractions is to squander this moment, to rob oneself of the spiritual nourishment embedded in this simple yet profound ritual. Consider also the symbolism of the ritual itself. Every act of washing is intended to cleanse the body and the soul, to symbolize the purification of sins and the preparation for standing in prayer. Talking unnecessarily or being distracted breaks the symbolic rhythm. The hands wash sins, the face cleanses thoughts, the feet purify actions. But if the mind is elsewhere, the symbolism is lost. Spiritual purification requires presence, mindfulness, and a heart focused on Allah. Every distraction, therefore, is a barrier to achieving this inner purification. The Prophet demonstrated the importance of concentration through his own practice. Even when performing wudu in communal spaces or in the presence of others, he maintained awareness, avoided trivial conversation, and focused on the act at hand. This teaches us that external circumstances are never an excuse for inattention. The presence of others, noise, or social interaction does not diminish the requirement for mindfulness. To follow the prophetic example, one must cultivate an inner discipline that safeguards focus, preserves attention, and prevents unnecessary speech. Furthermore, avoiding unnecessary speech during wudu fosters humility. When we speak casually, laugh, or become distracted, and we elevate the mundane over the sacred, the trivial over the divine. Wudu is a moment to humble ourselves before Allah, to acknowledge our dependence on His guidance and mercy, and to prepare our souls for prayer. Distraction and idle talk signify a lack of humility, a failure to recognize the sanctity of the act, and an undermining of the spiritual discipline that wudu seeks to instill. Mindfulness in wudu also strengthens character. The discipline to remain silent, focused, and aware is a reflection of inner self-control. It trains the believer to carry this awareness into other aspects of life: patience in adversity, attention in worship, carefulness in speech, and deliberation in action. Wudu becomes more than a ritual cleansing. It becomes a training ground for character, a method to cultivate mindfulness, and a practice that strengthens spiritual awareness in every act of life. Avoiding unnecessary speech also reflects gratitude. The act of wudu is a blessing, a gift of purification and preparation, a means to stand before Allah in a state of cleanliness and readiness. To treat it carelessly, to speak without purpose, or to be distracted is to show ingratitude for this gift. Gratitude in worship is expressed through attentiveness, mindfulness, and full engagement. Every unnecessary word, every lapse of focus diminishes this expression of gratitude. By maintaining silence and concentration, we honor the blessing of wudu, acknowledge its spiritual significance, and demonstrate reverence for Allah's commands. Moreover, this principle extends beyond wudu itself. The habit of avoiding distraction and unnecessary speech in acts of worship fosters a broader spiritual consciousness. It encourages the believer to approach every act of worship with attentiveness, to cultivate a habit of presence in prayer, fasting, charity, and remembrance of Allah. This habit of mindfulness creates a continuity of consciousness that permeates daily life, aligning actions with divine guidance and reinforcing the moral and spiritual framework that Islam seeks to instill. The consequences of neglecting this principle are subtle yet profound. One may perform wudu regularly, follow all physical steps, but if the heart and mind are distracted, the spiritual impact is lost. Prayer may be performed, yet the soul remains distant, the connection to Allah weakened, and the benefits of worship diminished. Avoiding unnecessary speech is therefore not a trivial recommendation. It is an essential condition for achieving the full purpose and reward of wudu. Finally, let us reflect on the wisdom behind this rule. Allah has prescribed specific methods, specific behaviors, and specific states of mind for acts of worship. These are not arbitrary. They are divine guidance designed to maximize spiritual benefit, cultivate mindfulness, and foster obedience. Avoiding unnecessary speech and distraction during wudu is part of this guidance. It ensures that every act, every motion, every drop of water, every breath is aligned with divine purpose, transforming wudu from a mere physical ritual into a profound spiritual act that cleanses, prepares and elevates the believer. In essence, wudu is a moment of sacred focus. It is a pause from worldly concerns, a preparation for the ultimate conversation with Allah in prayer. Talking unnecessarily or allowing distractions diminishes this sacred moment, reduces its spiritual benefit, and separates the believer from the prophetic example. Mindfulness, silence, and full attention are not optional, they are essential. By committing to this principle, the believer ensures that wudu fulfills its true purpose: purification of body, mind, and soul, readiness for prayer, and alignment with divine guidance in every detail. Wudu is a sacred act of purification, a ritual ordained by Allah to prepare His servants for prayer, for direct communion with Him. But wudu is not simply about washing the body, it is about cultivating an environment of cleanliness, respect, and mindfulness, both externally and internally. One of the most overlooked aspects of wudu is the condition of the place and the water used. Maintaining cleanliness of the environment where wudu is performed and ensuring the purity of the water is not a trivial matter. It is an essential part of the ritual, a reflection of sincerity and a requirement for spiritual integrity. Allah commands purity in both body and surroundings, and to neglect this principle is to risk undermining the very purpose of wudu. The Prophet emphasized the importance of cleanliness in all aspects of life. He said that cleanliness is half of faith, highlighting that Islam is not limited to abstract belief, but encompasses tangible actions and care for one's environment. When we perform wudu in a dirty place or with impure water, we compromise this principle. The body may be washed, but the surroundings and the medium of purification, the water itself, become sources of contamination, just as a tree cannot grow in polluted soil. The spiritual benefits of wudu cannot flourish in a neglected environment. The place of wudu must be clean, orderly, and conducive to reflection, mindfulness, and reverence for the act being performed. Water is the lifeblood of wudu, the instrument through which physical and spiritual purification is achieved. The Prophet taught us to use clean, wholesome water for ablution. Using water that is impure, stagnant, or contaminated invalidates the act. No matter how carefully the limbs are washed, every drop of water used in wudu is sacred, a gift from Allah, and must be treated with respect. When we ensure that the water is clean and the place of ablution is pure, we demonstrate mindfulness, reverence, and obedience to divine instruction. Conversely, neglecting cleanliness in the place or water used is a disregard for Allah's commands and diminishes the spiritual benefit of the act. Consider the practical implications. Performing wudu in a dirty place with water that contains impurities or is unfit for cleansing exposes the body to physical contamination and risks compromising the ritual. Beyond the physical, it also affects the mind. A cluttered, unclean, or chaotic environment distracts from the focus and attention that wudu requires. It is difficult to cultivate mindfulness, humility, and devotion when surrounded by filth, disarray, or stagnant water. The Prophet demonstrated that external purity is inseparable from internal purity. A clean body in a clean place using clean water prepares the believer fully for standing in prayer before Allah. Cleanliness in the place of wudu is also a reflection of respect for the ritual itself. Wudu is a sacred act, and the environment should reflect that sanctity. Performing ablution on dirty floors among waste or in unhygienic conditions undermines the dignity of the ritual. The act loses its symbolic power as a moment of preparation and purification. Maintaining a place is not merely about aesthetics. It is about honoring the purpose of wudu, acknowledging the sacredness of the act and demonstrating mindfulness of Allah's presence. Every believer must strive to cultivate an environment that supports spiritual reflection, not one that distracts or diminishes the act's significance. Water, too, must be treated with care. The Prophet would use only what was necessary, ensuring it was clean and free from contamination. The quality of water reflects the seriousness with which we approach wudu. Using water that is unclean, stagnant, or shared with others in unhygienic conditions violates the sanctity of the ritual. Each drop of water is a means of purification, and its condition is directly tied to the completeness and validity of wudu. This principle extends beyond personal practice to communal settings. In mosques, schools, and public spaces, providing clean water for ablution is a collective responsibility that ensures all believers can perform wudu in accordance with divine guidance. There is also a symbolic dimension to cleanliness in wudu. The environment and the medium of purification are extensions of the body and mind in ritual practice. And clean water represents purity of intention, the removal of impurity from the soul and readiness for worship. A clean place mirrors the clarity and organization of thought, the discipline required for mindfulness, and the sanctity of the act being performed, neglecting either compromises the symbolic and practical mentions of wudu, leaving the believer spiritually and physically deficient. Maintaining cleanliness requires attention to detail. The Prophet instructed us to remove any obstacles, impurities, or waste from the place of ablution. The water container should be clean, free from rust, dirt, or contamination. Floors and surfaces should be washed regularly, preventing the accumulation of dust, mud, or filth. These practical measures are not mere housekeeping. They are acts of worship, demonstrating obedience, mindfulness, and reverence for Allah's commands. They also foster an atmosphere conducive to reflection, focus, and spiritual elevation, reinforcing the connection between external cleanliness and internal purification. Furthermore, maintaining cleanliness protects others. In communal settings, such as mosques or shared ablution facilities, unclean water or dirty spaces can negatively affect fellow worshippers, spreading contamination and undermining the collective practice of wudu. Islam emphasizes consideration for others, respect for community, and the shared responsibility to maintain purity and hygiene. By keeping the place and water clean, a believer contributes to the spiritual and physical well-being of the entire community, embodying the principles of stewardship, respect, and cooperation taught by the Prophet. Cleanliness in wudu also reflects broader ethical and spiritual principles. It teaches discipline, attention to detail, and respect for resources. Water as a means of purification is a blessing from Allah, and using it responsibly in a clean and considered manner is an expression of gratitude. Similarly, maintaining a clean place demonstrates respect for the environment, for the self, and for the sacred act being performed. These practices extend beyond wudu, shaping the believer's approach to daily life, work, and interaction with others. Mindfulness in ritual hygiene cultivates mindfulness in all aspects of living. The spiritual consequences of neglect are significant. Performing wudu in unclean conditions or with impure water undermines the ritual's spiritual integrity, diminishes the focus and mindfulness required, and can even invalidate the act if certain conditions are not met. Beyond legality, however, it reflects a lack of consciousness, a disconnect from divine guidance, and a missed opportunity for spiritual growth. Maintaining cleanliness is therefore not optional. It is a requirement, a reflection of obedience, and a means to maximize the spiritual benefit of wudu. The Prophet demonstrated these principles consistently. Accounts from his companions describe how carefully he approached water, how he ensured the place of wudu was clean, and how he emphasized these practices to others. His example teaches us that every detail matters, that external hygiene and internal mindfulness are inseparable, and that true worship requires attention to both body and environment. By following this example, the believer ensures that wudu is performed fully, correctly, and with maximum spiritual benefit. Cleanliness also fosters a sense of sacredness. When the place is pure, the water is clear, and the environment is orderly, the act of wudu becomes a moment of reverence, reflection, and spiritual preparation. The believer approaches each motion with awareness, recognizes the blessing of the resources provided, and aligns intention with action. This sacred awareness elevates wudu from a routine habit to a profound spiritual practice, strengthening the connection between body, mind, and soul. Finally, let us reflect on the wisdom behind these teachings. Allah commands cleanliness not only for the sake of health and hygiene, but as a principle that shapes character, fosters mindfulness, and cultivates spiritual awareness. Every act of purification, including maintaining the cleanliness of the place and water used for wudu, is a step towards spiritual excellence. It is an opportunity to honor divine guidance, cultivate gratitude, and prepare fully for the sacred act of prayer. Neglecting this principle diminishes the spiritual impact of wudu, while adherence transforms it into a comprehensive act of worship that purifies the body, the mind, and the environment in which it is performed.